You ever hear a story so ridiculous that you can't help but shake your head? Well, buckle up. Because this one starts with me standing in my driveway, staring at a letter that might as well have been written in crayon, except it was stamped with the seal of my HOA. The letter told me that the solar panels I had just spent over $20,000 installing had to come down. Why? According to them, my panels clashed with the neighborhood's aesthetic standards. That was their exact wording. Not that the panels were unsafe. Not that they broke any law. Not even that they violated some obscure rule. No, they simply didn't look good. Now, here's the thing. Those panels weren't just about saving money for me. They were my way of cutting ties with an overpriced power company that had been gouging my bills for years. I'd done everything right. Permits filed, inspections passed. Even my neighbors loved the idea. But the HOA president, let's call her Margaret, Queen of Petty Kingdom, decided that my panels were an eyesore. When I ignored the first letter, the fines started rolling in. $50 a day, then $100. By the end of the first month, they claimed I owed over $3,000 in violations. Imagine being punished for producing your own clean energy. But here's the twist. Margaret didn't know who she was messing with. See, my day job isn't something she ever bothered to ask about. I'm an energy consultant. I know the laws better than she does. And one law in particular made her little crusade illegal from the start. My state had something called a Solar Rights Act, which flat out prohibits HOAs from banning solar panels. So instead of taking those panels down, I started documenting everything. Every fine notice, every nasty email, every voicemail she left threatening to escalate things if I didn't comply. I built a paper trail that could choke a printer. And while she thought I was buckling under pressure, I was actually preparing my counterattack. The more she pushed, the deeper she dug her own hole. And when I finally hit back, it wouldn't just stop her from touching my panels. It would make sure she and the HOA paid for my electricity for the rest of my life. This wasn't going to be a fight about aesthetics anymore. It was about to turn into the most expensive mistake Margaret and her HOA had ever made. The first time I showed up at the HOA meeting with a binder under my arm, you could practically hear the sneers from across the room. Margaret sat at the head of the table like she was queen of the cul-de-sac, gavel in hand, glaring at me as though my presence alone violated some unspoken rule. I placed that binder on the table and slid it toward her. Inside was every letter, every fine, and, most importantly, a copy of the state's Solar Rights Act highlighted in neon yellow. She flipped through it with this smirk, clearly thinking she could just wave it off. "Well," she said, voice dripping with sarcasm, "our community has standards. Your solar panels don't fit the image we're trying to maintain." I leaned forward. "Your standards don't override state law." The room went quiet. A couple of neighbors glanced at each other, suddenly realizing this wasn't just about aesthetics. Margaret, though, doubled down. "We'll let the courts decide," she snapped. Oh, how right she was. See, I wasn't just there to argue. I was setting the stage. That night, I filed a formal complaint with the state's housing authority. I also contacted a lawyer friend of mine who specialized in property law. Within a week, the HOA received a notice. Not only were they in violation of state law, but their fines against me were completely unenforceable. You'd think that would have made them back down. But no, Margaret was too stubborn. She doubled the fines, claiming the state didn't have jurisdiction over her HOA. That's when I knew it was time to escalate. We filed a lawsuit, not just to stop the fines, but to hold the HOA accountable for harassment, emotional distress, and unlawful interference with property rights. It wasn't just about me anymore. It was about every homeowner who had ever been bullied by an HOA, drunk on power. The best part? My neighbors started rallying behind me. Turns out, Margaret had stepped on a lot of toes over the years. She'd fined one guy for having his trash can out an hour late. She'd forced another family to repaint their shutters 3 times because she didn't like the shade of blue. By the time we showed up in court, it wasn't just my fight, it was the entire neighborhood's. And what happened in that courtroom? That was the turning point, the moment. The HOA's arrogance cost them more than they ever imagined. Walking into the courtroom, I half expected Margaret to tone it down. Maybe she'd finally realize the law was against her and try to cut her losses. But no. She strutted in like she was about to star in her own reality show, dragging the entire HOA board behind her as if they were her royal entourage. Her attorney wasted no time. He stood up and called my solar panels a visual nuisance that decreased property values for the entire neighborhood. He even tried to claim my panels caused glare hazards to passing drivers, something so absurd the judge raised an eyebrow before I even had a chance to respond. When it was my turn, I didn't just bring words. I brought receipts. I handed the judge evidence of the Solar Rights Act, Clear language that prohibited exactly what the HOA was attempting to do. I showed photos of my panels installed neatly and professionally, with not a single complaint from the neighbors. Then I played a recording of Margaret leaving me a voicemail, calling my panels garbage stuck to a roof, and promising to make my life miserable until they're gone. You could feel the air shift in the courtroom. The smirks on the board members' faces started fading. Even Margaret's attorney looked like he wanted to crawl under the table. And then came the knockout punch. My lawyer presented the financial breakdown of their fines, over $10,000 in total, and explained how every single one was not only invalid, but also a form of harassment under state law. He laid out our damages claim, lost work hours, stress, and legal fees. By the time he was done, we weren't just asking the court to stop the HOA, we were asking them to pay. The judge leaned back in his chair, steepling his fingers. "So," he said slowly, "you want this HOA to reimburse you for damages and cover the cost of your electricity moving forward?" "Yes, Your Honor," my lawyer said, calm as a rock. The silence in the room was deafening. Margaret's face turned a shade of red I didn't think was humanly possible. She stammered, muttering about protecting the neighborhood's image, but the damage was already done. When the gavel came down, it wasn't the end, but it was the beginning of a reckoning. The HOA was about to learn what happens when arrogance meets the full weight of the law. The ruling didn't just land, it hit like a thunderclap. The judge declared every single fine the HOA had issued against me invalid. He ruled that the HOA's actions were in direct violation of state law, and because of their persistence even after being warned, their conduct qualified as harassment. Then came the part I'll never forget. The court ordered the HOA to pay for all my legal fees, reimburse me for the stress and damages, and, this was the kicker, cover the cost of my electricity for life. You heard that right. Margaret's obsession with aesthetics had turned into a permanent energy bill for the HOA. I walked out of that courthouse with the weight of months of frustration lifted off my shoulders. But the real victory wasn't just mine. It was for every single person in our neighborhood who had suffered under Margaret's reign of pettiness. Suddenly, her power wasn't so absolute anymore. Within a week, neighbors who had been too scared to speak up started telling their own stories. The man fined for his trash can being out an hour late. He filed a complaint. The family forced to repaint their shutters 3 times. They started a petition. One by one, people began standing up to her. The HOA board, sensing the tide turning, held an emergency vote. Margaret was stripped of her title as president. Word spread fast. People actually celebrated in the cul-de-sac like it was the 4th of July. Balloons, barbecue grills, even sparklers. It felt like we had all been freed from a dictatorship. And me? Well, let's just say the first time I got my electric bill stamped paid by HOA, I couldn't help but laugh. Every time I flip on a light switch, charge my phone, or run my AC, I think of Margaret fuming, knowing she brought this all on herself. Funny thing is, my panels ended up raising property values. Realtors started highlighting them in listings, calling our neighborhood green-friendly. The same panels Margaret called garbage stuck to a roof became a selling point. The irony couldn't have been sweeter. In the end, all Margaret had to do was leave me alone. Instead, she turned a battle over solar panels into a 5-alarm legal disaster. And now, thanks to her, my family has free electricity forever. Sometimes fighting back isn't just about winning, it's about showing bullies that their power only exists if we let them use it. If you enjoyed this story, don't forget to hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and drop a comment below with your thoughts. Your support helps me bring you even more wild HOA and Karen stories every week.